שבת, פרק 18, משנה א'. משנה זו בא ללמד, this Mishnah comes to teach us, שאף על פי שכל דבר הראוי לאכילה לאדם. So we already learned, everything that one may eat, that one can eat, either an animal or a human being, מותר לטלטלו בשבת. You're allowed to move it on Shabbat, so you can take pig and feed it to your dog. You're allowed to take pig and feed it to your dog, whatever you want. You're allowed to take any kind of food for yourself.
But this only when you have Erev.
Yeah. It's talking about tiltu in your house. In your house.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be allowed.
Right.
I'll give you an example. If you have a pig in your house, just a steak, bacon, in your house, you're not allowed to touch it on Shabbat if you don't have a dog. If you have a dog, only then you will allowed to touch it.
It's not food for you.
It's not food for you. That's right. So
anything it's not food, you cannot touch.
You cannot even touch. So it tells you things that are food, either for you or for your animals, you're allowed to touch. מכל מקום, אם הטלטול כרוך בטרחה רבה, but it tells you, don't jump so much. You're not allowed to do extra work. If it's extra work, a lot of work, then you're not allowed to do it. אינו מותר אלא לצורך מצווה. We're not going to allow you just for the sake of a commandment, as we're going to see soon. ברם, but, דבר שאינו ראוי לאכילה לא לאדם ולא לבהמה, something that a human being cannot eat and an animal cannot eat, אסור לטלטלו בשבת. One is not allowed to move it on Shabbat.
It's actually not animal, it's בהמה. הוא לא אמר חיה.
Yeah, but it means any animal that's under your control. Any animal that's under your control. It's your responsibility.
So if you have an amer, if you have a tiger in the kloof, then in Shabbos you have a chazir, you can take it and feed it to him.
For example, if you have a zoo in your house, yeah.
אתה מבין למה אני מתכוון? אבל אני חשבתי only בהמה שזה kosher animals.
No, I think it gives...
That's what I was...
Yeah, it gives this example because that was the common one. Not because it's only this one. Because that's what people had. Yeah. מפנים בשבת. You're allowed to remove on Shabbat אפילו 4 ו5, which means even 4 or 5, קופות של תבן ושל תבואה. Baskets of hay or other grain. Now, what's a basket? You probably know. If you go to the place where you have horses, now how would you give the horses food? You would put it, but even the bales, maybe by you, but you will have a container that you will take, you'll put the hay inside and you will give it, you will move that container. Yeah. So that container that you use to feed a cow or to feed a goat or to feed so you can move like 4 or 5 bundles of this kupot. אף על פי שיש צורך בפינוי זה. So you go into your barn and there's a lot of things, but you want to use the barn for another purpose. You want to eat lunch over there, you want to give a class over there, you want to use the barn space for something else. So in other words, if it's just because you need something, are you allowed to move hay on Shabbat? Of course you're allowed to move hay on Shabbat. The question is, are you allowed to take hay from one side of the barn to the other side of the barn? Just take the hay?
Start to do like avodah.
That's right. So it says no, but you are allowed to do it because of guests, for example. אם אדם צריך למקום הקופות, להושיב שם אורחים לסעודה. You need another space for a meal, and you don't have enough space, and you're going to use that barn for some space. ומפני ביטול בית המדרש, or you're making it, you're going to give a class over there, there's not enough place for people to sit. או שצריך לפנותן, or you need to remove them, שיהיה מקום לתלמידים בבית המדרש, that students can sit in the study hall, ולא יבטלו בלימוד תורה, so that they're going to continue to learn Torah. ומשמיעת הדרשה, and from here we learn, כלומר שלצורך מצווה מותר לפנות את קופות התבן והתבואה. So why are you allowed to do it? A Shabbos meal, you're allowed to do it. You want to play poker, and you don't have enough place?
You're not allowed.
You're not allowed to do it.
L'shem mitzvah?
L'shem mitzvah, Shabbos meal or learning Torah. That's what it means. ואין חוששים לטרחה של שבת. In other words, otherwise it's considered extra work, and we don't look for extra work on Shabbat. We don't look for work. אבל לא את האוצר. But you're not allowed completely to remove everything away. For example, if you have just a few bundles and you want to remove everything from the barn, even for that, by the way, they will not let you do it. Why not? אבל לא את האוצר, כלומר, שלא יפנה את האוצר כולו. Don't clear the barn completely. What's the problem with clearing the barn completely? Because when you see the whole barn empty, you're going to start noticing all kinds of holes in the ground, in the barn. It wasn't like today. Even in today, most barns are just sand. Not just in those times. לפי שחוששים שמא יבוא לידי השוויית הגומות שבקרקע. We are worried there's going to be all kinds of things. You're going to smooth it. Once you take it, it's automatically. You're taking the grain, you see a small hole, you go like this with your hand. You're not going to think about it. You're afraid that you might do that. She toldat choresh, and this is an offspring of choresh, offspring of plowing. Finished this object. And continue. Mefanim trumat tehora. What happens if you're in Israel, for example? You're, for example, Aryeh in his barn has wheat.
For the Kohen.
Wheat which is truma. So the question is, Aryeh say, I'm not allowed to touch it now. Right? You're not allowed to touch it. Why? Because I cannot eat it. It's muktzeh for me. It's only food for whom? For a Kohen.
It's not for me.
It's not for me.
For the behemah.
It's not for the behemah either.
Right.
It's for my behemah, not for your behemah. So maybe you can touch it. So it says over here, you're allowed to touch it. So it says why?
Why?
מפנים תרומת תורה, כלומר, which means, מותר לישראל לטלטל בשבת. And Israel is allowed to move truma on Shabbat, ולפנות אפילו תרומת תורה. So this rule is even if pure truma, שאינה ראויה לו לאכילה, a truma that he may not eat. שכן ראויה היא לכהן, because a Kohen can eat it. Once it is permitted as food, it's permitted as food. In other words, I know that you're not allowed to do it, but since somebody can eat it, it is permitted. In other words, you're not going to look at the gavra. You're not going to look at the prohibition of the man. You're going to look at the object itself. Is the object allowed to some people? Once the object, some people are allowed to eat it, you will be allowed to move it.
חזיר גם you're allowed to move.
So
it's allowed to eat for some animals.
It's not your animals. It's not your animals. You're only allowed to feed your animals.
The Kohen will not belong to you.
It doesn't matter.
Just
are you allowed
for somebody that can eat?
But a Kohen can be a visitor. A person's food, this food belongs to somebody. Like I said, you have an uncle who's going to come and eat truma. Whatever the case is, yeah. It's a business thing. You're not allowed to feed somebody else's animals on Shabbat. You're not allowed to feed even wild animals on Shabbat. So this is completely.
You can make it.
אבל תרומה טמאה, he's going to give you an example. A truma which is impure, now even no Kohen can eat it, no animal can eat it, nothing can eat it. So now if it's impure truma, then you can't touch it. אסורה לטלטלה בשבת. Now you're not allowed to even touch it on Shabbat or to remove it in Shabbat. לפי שאינה ראויה לאכילה אף לכהן, because even a Kohen may not eat it. שהרי דינה בשרפה. What do you do with it? You burn it. ודמאי. What about dmai? So dmai is produce that was taken from an ignoramus, an amaret, somebody who doesn't know the rules, and maybe he tithed, maybe he didn't tithe. You don't know. So what about if you have dmai in your barn? Are you allowed to use that? So dmai, it says, don't even touch it because you don't know what it is until you give meiser. You're not allowed to touch it, right? That's what you would think.
Okay.
So it says, no, dmai you're even allowed to. So it says, how? V'dmai. תבואה שנלקחה מעם הארץ החשוד על המעשר. This is a produce that was taken from an ignoramus that we're not sure that he tithe. שאסור לאכלה, you're not allowed to eat it, עד שיאסרו המספק. You're not allowed to eat it until you're going to give tithing. But just remember, who disallowed you to eat it?
You can't do it on Shabbos, give tithing.
That's right. Or you can, we see later on. I don't think you can. We learned it, but I just don't remember. Yeah. So, but the idea here, who disallowed this dmai? It's not disallowed from the Torah. The rabbis, if you remember, disallowed the dmai. Okay? ומכל מקום מותר לטלטלה בשבת. Nevertheless, you'll be allowed to move it on Shabbat. So you're going to ask, how? Nobody can eat it. He says, no, there's some people who may eat dmai. Who's allowed to eat dmai? לפי שראויה לאכילה לעניים. Because you're allowed to give dmai to a poor person. Why? Because the poor person needs to eat now. So the sages says, you have a doubt, you pay money. But for him, don't wait until you have money. Give him immediately. It's not just pikuach nefesh. The Torah gives it to him. The Torah allows it to him. You want to be strict? Be strict on yourself. Don't be strict on somebody else. So since it's allowed for poor people, just like the Kohen, even though it's allowed to some people, we're going to allow it completely to be moved.
So why the logic is not allowed to your guests?
No, because you don't...
That your guests, that you can make them, that you give it to him like the ani. You can force him to...
If the guest is an ani, you're allowed to give it to him. But if the guest is not ani, the only... Yeah.
Just a guest who is not ani.
You're not allowed to give it to him. He needs to be poor. It's allowed for poor people. כמו ששנינו. מאכילין את העניים דמאי. It says you're allowed to feed a poor person this produce. ואף לעצמו ראויה היא. And he continues, you know what? Potentially, it's also good for you. How? שכן יכולו להפקיר את נכסיו את עני. Because potentially, you can say tomorrow, all my possessions belongs to the temple, and then you become an ani and take it. So potentially, it even belongs to you a little bit. Potentially, not really. Okay. Next one. ומעשר ראשון שנתלה תרומתו. Also first tithing that you took truma. What does it mean? שהופרשה ממנו תרומת מעשר, that you took from it the tithing, the 10%, אף אם לא הופרשה ממנו תרומה גדולה. So the Levi got his share, even though the Kohen didn't get his share. כגון, when does it happen? שהלוי, שהקדים הלוי ליטול את מעשרו בשיבולים. The Levi came and took his produce before you gave the Kohen. How did he do it? Because the Levi didn't wait for it to be in the barn. He took it already from the field. You give it to the Kohen afterwards it's in the barn. היינו קודם שנתחייבה התבואה בתרומה. In other words, the Levi took it before tithing even kicked in. He took it. שכגון זה, he says, in such a manner, פטור הלוי מלהפריש ממנו תרומה גדולה. It says, in such a manner, the Levi himself, because he took it before the tithing for the Kohen kicked in, he doesn't need to give the tithing for the Kohen. Because he took it when it was still in the field, the tithing didn't kick in. וכיוון שמותר לאכלו, מותר גם לטלטלו בשבת. And since the Levi is allowed to eat it, he's also allowed to move it. It's a trick thing. ומעשר שני והקדש שנפדו. And second tithing, and also an animal, for example, you gave to Beit HaMikdash, and then you redeemed it with money, also you're allowed to move it. רשאי אדם לפדות פירות מעשר שני שלו בכסף. So we said you're allowed to take the fruits that you're supposed to eat in Yerushalayim. You take the fruit, sell it in the market, and exchange it for money. ולהעלות הכסף לירושלים. והפירות שנפדו מותר לו לאכלם. And then you're allowed to eat the fruits, because you already paid for him, the money you're going to take to ירושלים. מכל מקום, בכל מקום, in any way, you're allowed to eat those fruits outside of the walls of ירושלים. וכן דבר שהוקדש להשם, also things that were giving to God, אפשר לפדותו בכסף, you're allowed to buy it with money, והוא יוצא לחולין. Of course, we said you have to pay quarter more. So if it was $1, you pay 125. וכסף הפדיון נעשה הקדש. Then you have to take that money, and that money is holy. ברם, הפודר המעשה שני שלו הקדשו. But somebody who redeems his fruits or his animal, צריך להוסיף חומש על דמי פדיונו. He needs to add, we say, a fifth, or quarter. ובא המשנה להשמיענו, and the Mishnah comes to teach us, במעשר שני והקדש שפתות הבעלים, it says, once you redeemed it, and even though you didn't give the fifth yet, you didn't add the 25%, שאף על פי שפדעום ללא תוספת החומש, you didn't add what you're supposed to be, the right amount, אין החומש מעכב. You would think that now I'm not allowed to touch it because it's not mine yet, it's not redeemed yet. It says, you're right, it's not redeemed for you, but halachically it is redeemed, therefore you'll be allowed to move these fruits. והרי הם פדועים וראויים לאכילה. Still they can be eaten. You're not allowed to eat it because it says you should add more. ומותר אפוא לטלטלם בשבת, and therefore you're allowed to move them on Shabbat. Another thing, והתורמוס היבש. What about a food that usually people don't eat? It's a kind of food that people will not eat. מין קטניות, it's a type of legume, like bean, אף על פי שהוא מר וקשה, even though it's bitter and hard, מותר לטלטלו בשבת. You're allowed to move it on Shabbat. And you're going to say, what do you mean? Nobody eats it this way. He says, no. If you're starving, you'll eat it. So therefore, poor people would eat it. מפני שהוא מאכל לעניים. Because it is food for the poor people, they would eat it even though it doesn't taste good and nobody normal will eat it. ויש גורסים, and there are those who says, מפני שהוא מאכל לעזים. Some say you're allowed to move it because it's food for goats. אבל לא את התבל. What happens if you have produce that you didn't tithe at all? There was no tithing done at all, not for the Kohen, not for the Levi, not for nobody. It was not tithed. אסור לטלטל בשבת התבל. Those kind of food, you're not allowed to touch on Shabbat at all. היינו תבואה שלא הפרשו מן התרומה ומעשר. This is, wasn't given anything to the, no tithing to the Kohen, no tithing to the Levi. שאסורה באכילה אף לכהן, because it's prohibited for everything. ובגמרא מבואר, the Gemara explains, אפילו תבל מדרבנן, כגון הזרוע בעציץ שלא נקוב. This is even tevel according to the rabbis. For example, what is a tevel according to the rabbis? You have a tree in a pot without a hole. So some say it's not in the land. But the rabbi says you shouldn't eat from that tree also. Even that kind of tevel, don't do. ולא מעשה ראשון שלא נתלה תרומתו. Also, not first tithing, that the truma was not taken. אין צורך לומר במעשר ראשון שלא הופרש ממנו תרומת מעשר. Of course, it's a tithing for the Levi that you didn't give the מעשר, שהרי תבל גמור, that's for sure you're not allowed to. אלא כוונת המשנה היא, but the Mishnah is talking even in another case, כמבואר בגמרא, like it says in the Gemara, שלא נתלה ממנו תרומה גדולה, that you didn't give the Kohen yet. וכגון, שלאחר מרוח הקרי, for example, you put it in the granary and you flatten the granary, היינו לאחר שנתחייבה תבואת רבה. From that moment when you flatten the granary, you were supposed to give tithing to the Kohen. הקדים הלוי ונטל את מעשרו קודם שהפריש ממנו תרומה גדולה. The Levi came a day earlier, the Kohen was supposed to come on Tuesday, he could only come on Thursday. And the Levi on Wednesday already took his part. הרי זה, בחגון זה חייב הלוי להשלים מעשרו. It's not like he took it from the field in the first case that we talked about. In the first case, he took it before the Kohen kicked in. Now he's taking it after the Kohen kicked in. So since it's after the Kohen, now the Levi needs to give the Truma. וכל זמן שלא הפריש ממנו תרומה גדולה, so as long as the Levi did not give his part to the Kohen, הרי הוא תבל ואסרו תטל בשבת. And therefore it's not allowed to be moved on Shabbat. ולא...
Not to move for the Levi.
Not to move for anybody.
For anybody.
For anybody. It practically is going to be in the Levi's house because he took it. Okay. Practically, but anybody's on it. Yeah. Practically, you're right. It's for the Levi. It's for him because he took it. Yeah. ולא את מעשר שני והקדש שלא נפדו. And also not second tithing, or an animal you gave to the temple that you didn't redeem yet. ואפילו נפדו, even if they were redeemed, אלא שלא נפדו כהלכתם, but you didn't redeem them the right way. What does it mean not redeeming in the right way? כגון מעשר שני שפתאו באסימון. For example, you redeemed it with Bitcoin. This is an asimon. You didn't redeem it with cash, with the monetary value. By the way, I think American money today is not considered American money. It's considered asimon. It doesn't have the value. I think money, it used to be, in the 60s I think, right, when it changed, that the dollar was connected to the gold. Every dollar. So maybe then you can say it had some values. But today, it's almost like Bitcoin. But the idea.
It's almost like paper.
Yeah. In other words, it's מטבע שאין עליה צורה. It's a coin that doesn't have a shape on it. Which means it goes up and down in value. Like an asimon.
What if I have a matbea that doesn't have anything, but it's all gold? It's round.
No. So then the value is gold.
It's gold.
That's what it means. That is money.
A backing.
That is real money. That's the only real money there is. Yeah. Asimon, it doesn't the paper money of today is all asimon.
Looking for the makor, the real thing.
That's right, the value. והקדש שחיללו על גבי קרקע, or an animal that you redeemed it with property, with land. שכגון זה אין פדיונם פדיון. It's not considered פדיון, even though land is the best currency, but land is not transferable easily. So therefore it's not considered a good one. שכן בפדיון מעשר שני נאמר, וצרת הכסף בידך, because in tithing, in taking the second tithing, it says, and you should put the money in your head. What is in the money? The value. It doesn't mean the Bitcoin. It means the value. You need to hold some value. In other words, just like fruits have some value, the coin has to have value, not just an asimon that goes up and down, depends on the thing. דבר שיש בצורה ובהקדש נאמר, what about if you gave an animal to the בית המקדש and now you want to redeem it? ויסף חמישית כסף ערכך עליו. And you need to add a fifth of the value of it on him. ומכאן שנפדה בכסף ולא בקרקע. From here it says that you learn that you cannot give land to redeem this animal. הילקח מעשר שני והקדש, אלו אסורים באכילה. Therefore, until you redeemed it the right way, these things are prohibited in eating. Nobody is allowed to eat it. So don't touch it on Shabbat. ואסור איפה לטלטלם בשבת. And therefore, you're not allowed to touch them on Shabbat. ולא את הלוף. Also, you're not allowed to touch the loof. It's a type of onion. Maybe, I'm thinking the reason why you're not allowed to, because maybe it's, in order to eat it, you need to cook it. And since you don't eat it raw, in other words, it needs to be processed. I'm not quite sure why you don't allow to. Or maybe it's going to explain by the other one. ולא את החרדל, and not the חרדל, yeah, for the reason I said, and not the mustard, שאינו ראוי לאכילה באין. It's not befit, nobody eats it this way. In other words, it needs to be processed first. It's raw. If somebody would eat it this way, I give it to you. But nobody eats it this way. ובשבת, אני רואה לתכנו, in Shabbat, you cannot cook it. You cannot prepare it on Shabbat.
אבל I can put onion in my salad.
Yeah, but not this kind of onion. It's a special, that's why it says loof. It's a special onion that you don't put it in the salads. I don't know what exactly the problem of that onion, but whatever it is. כל אלו הועיל ואינם רואים לאכילה. All these, since they don't befit to eating, לא לאדם ולא לבהמה, not to a man and not to an animal, אסור לטלטלם בשבת. No animal is eat it, no man eat it, therefore they're
I think he's trying to say that anything, in a way, food that it's not ראוי לאכילה, תתק לאכול, don't touch it because you can't eat it.
That's right. Even though you're going to prepare something from it.
But you...
I'll give you an example, very good example. Raw steak, if you don't have a dog. Kosher raw steak. A kosher raw steak you cannot touch. Because nobody eats raw steaks. Yeah. It's only cooked. That's exactly what he's saying.
That's what he's talking about.
Yeah, I think that's what he's talking about. Even though it's steak, what do you want from me? Rabban Shimon Gamliel matir beluf. Rabban Shimon Gamliel says, luf, I disagree with you. This onion, I disagree with. Mutar letatelo b'Shabbat. You're allowed to touch it on Shabbat. Why? Mipnei shu ma'achal orvin. Why? Because it is the food of ravens. Now, but you would say, this is your question from before, but you say raven is not a behema. Nobody grows ravens.
Not kosher.
So it says, she'ashirim megadlim otam leshem sha'ashua. It says, rich people grow up ravens for a dog. They have tigers. Even though you're right, it's not behema. Rich people like tigers, like elephants, like this. So, some people have it.
So if the same thing, if we would live in the time of the Gemara, and we live in Saudi Arabia, and people would have namerim, but then they would say, you can take the
raw steak. You can also take raw steak and give it to your tiger.
Give it to your tiger.
Very good.
That's the...
Yeah. וסובר רבן שמעון בן גמליאל, and Rabban Shimon Gamliel says, we had this thing, שכל ישראל בני מלכים, says, but somebody's going to call him, who has ravens over here? Yeah, only the king maybe has ravens, but the rest, so it doesn't matter, כל בני ישראל. Once you permit it to some people, you can permit it to everything. We had this before, remember that?
Yeah, no discrimination.
והילקח מותרים כולם לטלטל את הלוף בשבת. So therefore, once you allow the king to touch luf, you're allowing everybody to touch luf. אבל תנא סובר, the תנא קמא things, הואיל ואין הדבר מצוי שבין אדם ללווים. It's not common. You're not going to find a lot of people have tigers. Yeah? אין להטיל טלטול אלוף בשבת. You know, a raw steak, even though in Texas some people have tigers, you know, they're crazy. No. It's not a common thing. You cannot touch a raw steak on Shabbat. והלכה כתנא קמא. And the halacha is going to be like the first Tana. בתוספות מובא שרבן שמעון גמליאל מתיר בלוף וכל שכן מתיר בחרדל. So רבן שמעון גמליאל permits both luf and חרדל. מפני שהוא מאכל ליונים. Because mustard you can feed to doves, obviously. And by the way, it looks like for doves then everybody will be allowed to eat it according to him. That's for sure. He says, I don't understand you rabbis. He would even argue with the rabbis, even according to your system. In Israel, everybody has doves. It's not like, not uncommon. That's something that people have. Okay.